Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jesus in the Upper Left podcast. I'm excited to have Brad Ketch with me today. I'm Pete Armstrong. Brad is joining us from the Rockwood Community Development Corporation, and we're gathered at our new podcast studio at Park Lane Church right here in East Portland. I think I'm going to call this place the Cave. But Brad, introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us about who you are and what you're up to.
Oh, thanks, Pastor Pete. I really appreciate coming today. You know, this location here, Park Lane Church, is very familiar to me. I went to grade school at what was then called Lynch Plaza, right next door.
Whoa, nice.
First grade, right next door, all the way through middle school at what then was Harold Oliver Middle.
Okay.
And they kind of renamed everything because I'm really old. And but this church has been a fixture in my life for, since I was 4 or 5.
Hey, yeah, the church is turning 65 years this November. We're going to celebrate, so we're excited about that.
Yeah, I really just walked to this location from my house on 142nd and Stark, and at that time, Rockwood, this community that we're going to be talking about today, it was a white, middle class, nice commuter community. There was a really all farmland around here until, it was just being developed for families like mine. Yeah, went to Centennial High School. I worked at the Fred Meyer that was on the intersection of Stark and Burnside.
Yep.
The Rockwood Public Library was my library when I was a little kid. So
same location?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just all fixed up now.
I think it's the same staff.
It could be. It could be. Yes, there's some
quiet over there.
Older folks there. Yes.
So yeah, it's really my community, and I never thought that I would be so involved in the community. I mean, a lot of life happened between when I was, raised here, went away to college in the Midwest, and then got involved in the telecommunications industry, which I worked in for like 25 years. Lived all over the U.S. My wife and I had all 4 kids when we were living in Chicago. We mainly lived in Chicago most of those years.
Yeah.
And around 2000, we decided to relocate here so I could take a position as the CEO of a chip fabrication company, semiconductors. And as we were looking for a place to live, we ended up in the Pleasant Valley area of Gresham, which is just immediately south of Rockwood. And that was it. I had no interaction with the community, when we came back in 2000, but it had changed a lot.
Yeah. And then so this is Brad's book, which he very kindly gave to me last year, and I read about 3 weeks ago. Really, really just enjoyed it. Congratulations on the book and the way that God's using it. That's really encouraging to all of us. But somebody literally dropped into your house lap.
Yeah. Well, this area of town that we live in is more like little farm type estates, and we have fencing around our house and a lot of land. So when somebody knocks at the door at 5:00 in the morning, you're like, something's really wrong.
Yeah, you're like, I'm about to go work out, and here's a young person there
was this kid standing there. He had been involved in a drug deal that had gone bad, and he had been dumped in the rose bushes outside of our house. And he was kind of cut up a little bit. I think he was more really scared and, kind of almost like in shock sort of a thing.
Yeah, where am I?
What happened? He might have been using, I don't really know. But he just wanted his phone. He didn't have his phone with him. He just wanted to get home.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, I'll be honest with you, I was kind of like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 5. I'm getting ready to go lift with my friend. And then it occurred, I was like, I'll call the police. And he's like, no, dude, don't do that. I don't want them involved. And then I realized we're practically driving by. We could certainly, and we did.
Drop them off,
Dropped him off on 194th and Stark in a little, 1-bedroom or 1-level apartment. And I was like, this is not the Rockwood that I knew. What's going on here? There's a strip club across the street. And, now I know a lot of, narcotics and human sexual trafficking.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is going on here? And I kind of felt like, who's doing anything about this? Somebody's got to be, right? But I found out later, like, no.
Yeah. At that point, like at the start of your journey, kind of being back in your journey of what you're doing now, did you know some of the history of like Rockwood kind of got lost in the shuffle?
Not at all.
Okay.
And I
okay.
think actually I've recovered a lot of that history and put it in the book. A lot of it is stuff that had been intentionally forgotten.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's kind of all around Portland, but it's definitely in East County. Like if we just don't talk about it, it never existed.
Yeah. Oh, like your chapter on racism. I mean, but that's like, yeah, that's our narrative of like, yeah, we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to.
I remember when I was like second grade, right here and right next door, I was really taken with cowboys and Indians, you know, and I had noticed that they were all set in like Arizona or wherever. And I asked my teacher, I said, did we have Indians and cowboys? And she goes, no, there were never any Indians that lived here. And I was like,
so ridiculous.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Now it's like, what?
Yeah.
Why would you even think that?
I know.
Right.
I know.
And
wow.
I didn't know, even though I'm a fifth generation Portlander, I did not know that it was illegal to be African American in Oregon until 1926.
Yeah.
What? Or the incredible mistreatment of Japanese farmers in World War II.
Yeah. You know, to credit my previous pastor, Randy Rowland, he addressed that in a sermon. Like, so I was 24, 25 years old, again, having grown up in the Northwest, in Olympia, and he cited that as some of the sin and evil that we had participated in as a culture during World War II, like here in Washington and Oregon.
Right. I think sometimes we struggle. I know I struggle with the idea of, do I have a personal responsibility for like a cultural, historical sin? And I mean, directly, no, but indirectly, and as part of the context that I've lived my entire life, of course.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that I feel guilt, but I feel responsible. Right? To do something, to enter into the story in some way that makes sense for me.
Yeah. And to be, to be someone that is going to educate the next person. Because what about the other kids in your second grade class that never asked questions or never like pushed back or never did research? Yeah, it's kind of wild to think about. So we, a lot of people that pay attention to this podcast are pastors, church planters, potential church planters, people thinking about multiplication in general of like, okay, maybe I've got a house church, but I would love to see that be 2 house churches or 4. I would love to be able to reach the Cully neighborhood, just all over Portland and then all over the Northwest, really. So you have gathered a lot of information in Rockwood over your journey. Like, what would you tell a nonprofit leader or a pastor about our community?
Wow. I mean, there's so much. I think
want to talk the rest of the podcast about that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, let's make that a topic alone to talk about is the skill of becoming expert on the community. Yeah. That's a thing.
Yeah.
You get trained.
Exegeting the culture.
Exegeting the culture. Wow. There's your book, man. Knowing the community better than the community knows itself.
Yeah.
I think is sometimes the way in to developing a strategy that's going to work. You have to leave all the expectations behind, though.
Yeah.
I think it's especially hard if you're, seminary trained or you're like me, coming from a upper middle class white background. Like you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what assumptions you carry with you just when
you're like, I got my MBA, I got this experience, I can,
I'm set, man.
Yeah.
But what I've learned in a community like Rockwood, where there's 90 languages spoken at home in a 2 square mile area.
Amazing.
Is that you don't know nothing.
Yeah.
And nobody knows nothing.
Yeah.
It's now that I'm being invited to speak more nationally, I'll say, like, if the audience is people involved in community development, I'll be like, hey, we have 90 languages spoken at home in 2 square mile area. This is definitely the most diverse area in Oregon, but I'm curious, audience, does anybody have more diversity? And I've yet to have anybody raise their hand. So like maybe maybe
The only thing I've ever heard of is
Manhattan.
Queens, New York.
Yeah, Queens.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
But like literally, I mean, they say that's, one of the most diverse places. But yeah, like 90 languages is crazy.
It's crazy.
It's amazing.
It's both fantastic because we get to eat the best food.
Yeah.
There's so much cultural expression going on that I love. I think one of the biggest challenges, though, is that we assume that culture, our neighborhood cultures, are kind of organized. There are leaders. There is a way of being. And in a place like Rockwood, not really.
Yeah.
When an entire community is made up of people who have been displaced, in the case of African Americans from downtown Portland, or are refugees who've been traumatized, or are immigrants, very aspirational immigrants, but usually they're kind of on their way somewhere else. Like they'll be in the community because it's cheap, but as soon as they or their children make it, then we're out of here.
Yeah. They're kind of the Athens, like when Scott McCracken and I did the Athens stuff last summer, it's like you're coming from Iran, Afghanistan, you're going to Athens, you're going to Rockwood, but you don't want to be there in like 2 or 3 years.
No.
It's like we're on our way to somewhere else. But
so there's no.
What about those of us that feel called and this is our home long term?
Well, I mean, the pastors are incredibly important.
Yeah.
And all churches, whether you're feeling as a pastor or leader, whether you're feeling like your church is particularly relevant or not, it is those deep roots that, you're not going anywhere. You've got a building, you've got a history, you've got a institutional commitment to place. And even if it's not working, you feel you are there. And when we started 11 years ago now, the very first thing that we did was to focus on the pastors.
Yeah.
The very first, because
why did you do that? Because you and your wife are people of faith?
Well, we are, but that's not actually the main issue. The main issue is that for a community to rise into prosperity and being a place where people can flourish, the community has to do that. An outsider can't do it. An organization can't do that. The community has to be functioning. Functioning communities heal themselves. That's just humanity. So how do you create functioning communities? You talk about the idea of social capital. Social capital is the connectivity that we all have with each other.
Yeah.
It's if you're a low-income person or a kid who's trying to climb out, do you know who to call? You aspire to be in an office somewhere. Have you ever actually been in an office?
Yeah.
You don't know who could help you. So in community development, the task of creating social capital is actually a thing. You can actually do it. But you have to start with what's already working.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to. You're not trying to build on what's broken. You're trying to build on what's working. And so the very first thing we did was say, all right, pastors.
Yeah.
They're already here. It's working. They maybe don't know each other. Maybe they're not in kind of a cooperative sense of we're working together and worshiping together.
Yeah.
But let's convene.
Yeah.
And we did it right over here at the Seventh-day Adventist Church on 182nd.
Okay.
We had no idea. No idea. We literally got dialed and invited people. And
just cold called.
Yeah. I mean, I knew some. I mean, some people knew some people, but there were definitely folks who showed up. There were 40, I think, that very first time. And everybody was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
What did you do? And I'm like, we started the conversation. That's what we did.
Yeah.
We don't own the conversation. We don't direct the conversation.
Yeah.
And the objective, the goal was to start to have what you now run with, United Worship and 7 Days of Prayer and United Action.
Yeah. Shalom Rockwood.
Shalom Rockwood.
All the things that it is.
Yeah. I picked that name because of Isaiah 60, which is a description of, the whole chapter is a description of what the Shalom community kind of looks like.
Yeah. And people have come to me being like, can I start Shalom Park Rose? It's like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We would love that to be in so many other places.
Like what's the methodology or the tool set? There really isn't one. It's convening, it's holding loosely the structure, being like a arbiter or a holder of process.
Yeah.
Without worrying about what the outcome might be. Our world needs a lot more organizations that can do that.
Yeah.
But over the years, the Shalom leadership team eventually coalesced kind of around you now. And my organization isn't officially evolved.
Yeah.
Which is actually our model.
You kind of helped us leave the nest.
We kind of kicked you out of the nest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Now we went off to college.
Excuse me. Yeah. Well, we had a staff member, Scott McCracken, who was kind of 1 foot in Shalom and 1 foot at the CDC. And then eventually he was like, I think I'm just going to work with Shalom Network. And we're like, outstanding. Awesome.
Yeah.
Work.
Yeah, empowerment. We're going back to the social capital. I think that's so important. I think that's maybe a sweet spot for our audience. I mean, just one illustration that popped into my head. There was a young man from our church that just grew up on Division right here with a single dad, and African-American kid, has really done well for himself, and is in his early 20s, wanted to be a pilot. And, asked me about, Pastor, can you help me? Like, do you happen to know anybody that works for an airline? Or, I mean, how can I start to get my hours and do that? And I happen to know the first woman that ever graduated from Top Gun. Where do I know her? From my church growing up in Longview, Washington.
Of course. And
we, just living down the street from each other and going camping. And so we were able to have a Zoom call, the three of us, and for him to ask her these questions, what's that process like? And just amazing but that's social capital that
Absolutely.
Like, I can be like, hey, Becky, there's a young man in my congregation. And for her to say on the call, like, well, if you, if you are tight with Pastor Pete's like my brother. And so we're tight, and we're going to help each other through this. We're going to figure out how to get you a pilot if that's what God's calling you to do, to become a pilot,
I love that story because it's a great example of how it really works.
Yeah.
There's two kinds of social capital. There's bonding and there's bridging. Let me tell you the difference. The bonding is where a group that has an affinity for each other meet for the first time or work. Think of it as a circle, but everybody who, and all the people are standing at the periphery of the circle and they're looking inward.
Yeah.
They're like, and the other's bridging, where somebody turns their around and looks out and connects to other circles.
Yeah.
Right? And you need both.
Becky's bridging because she's like, I'm a woman, pilot, and there wasn't always opportunities for us. And even the year I started at the Naval Academy, that's when it opened for even women to be in combat. And so I'm going to have a bridge to this African-American young man that doesn't have a lot of opportunities to be a pilot. And so it was, that's amazing. Bonding and bridging.
I like
that.
So we do, Rockwood Speaks still to this day in Rockwood. It's nothing more complicated than going to an apartment complex where we know one person and we're like, could you invite your neighbors? We have food. And then we have a facilitated conversation, which is a couple of open-ended questions.
Yeah.
Like, not even designed to, it's not like group process where you're trying to get the group to move from point A to point B. It's really just to get the group to talk. And usually the biggest outcome is other people in the room meet other people they didn't know and they go, oh, you live here, or oh, your kid's in my kid's classroom.
Yeah.
And they begin to develop bonding social capital. It always amazes me that if we pull together people from a kind of a smaller cultural or ethnic group, like the Tongans or the Rohingyas, we frequently find that they don't know each other. And I always assume, right? Like, there's only 3,000 of you in the entire state of Oregon. You guys must know each other. They don't. Because why? Because they're victims of serial forced displacement. So just being a convener for bonding social capital, huge value. And that's something any pastor or any nonprofit leader could do. Zero budget, zero, time commitment. But then from there, what we we build on that. So after every one of those, we call them level 1 Rockwood Speaks conversations.
Yep. And level 2 is like Shalom Rockwood. But
No, you're at 3.
3, oh yeah, okay.
You're at 3, man,
Okay.
and there is no 4.
Okay.
For 2 is like, so level 1's about connecting. Level 2 is about acting.
Okay.
Like, hey, maybe we could all start to think about a particular issue, like
Yeah.
that has like very tangible, short-term, low-cost. We need to replace the lights in the parking lot of the apartment.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want to get a couple of people connected to tutoring at the school. That it's action, but and then the third level is system change, where you're really going after the fundamental, like the environment of the entire community. Yeah. And so if you start with a lot of level 1s and a fewer level 2s, and then you kind of build up to a 3, it works.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, what I hear from you, I want to make this a direct question, is so you and I understand that right now it's kind of trendy to complain about Portland, or to complain about our country in general. We're very divided and we have all these issues, and there's all kinds of things going on. But what I hear from you and what I observe from the book is basically like, if we are going to heal our communities, if we're going to help communities flourish, if we are going to lower the number of people living on the streets, if we're going to lower the number of people using drugs in our community, it's going to be starting there.
I mean, I believe so. And I didn't invent any of this stuff, by the way.
Yeah.
I just read a bunch of books, and I also observed, frequently evangelicals and Americans do this stuff internationally all the time. We don't do it domestically. One time I was talking to a church, big church, mega church, to their board of elders.
Yeah.
I was talking about some of our ideas and our concepts. And this elder stops and he turns to the pastor and he goes, all right, now I understand the difference between relief and development. Okay. Why is it that every single thing we fund internationally is development, and every single thing we fund locally is relief? And I thought,
and he didn't have a good answer for that, did he?
Well, if we can get that definition of terms kind of in the water, I think it'll help a lot in our country.
Yeah.
So I do believe that that development is going to be basically the only path forward for America. I don't know what other options we have left.
Yeah. One of the wisest things that the denomination I'm part of, the Christian Reformed Church, 8 years ago, we merged the relief work and the evangelistic work, church planting work we do overseas with what we did in North America.
Oh, okay.
And became this new organization called Resonate, which I do a little bit of consulting and work with. But it was because, the stuff that you do with Kenyan immigrants in Rockwood is not that different from the work you would do in Nairobi.
It's probably identical.
And we're trying to, but most American Christians don't think that way at all.
Well, I had international exposure, and for a while, right before we launched the CDC, Rockwood CDC, I ran a multinational nonprofit NGO in Asia that worked with 100,000 ultra-poor Filipinos a year.
Yeah.
And during that time, Pete, I saw an organization that was doing it all. They were doing healthcare and education and economic development and running churches, and they were involved in both relief and development efforts.
Yeah.
And they would enter into a community, and at first they would kind of measure like all sorts of these indicators of prosperity and flourishing and health, and judge where everybody was at. And then just 4 months later, after huge intervention that was holistic, they would apply the same metric and find that people had moved massively on the scales in just 4 months.
That's crazy.
And it was an eye-opener to me.
Yeah.
Because I realized that if you're not doing it all, you're probably not doing it at all. So then you come back to a context like this and you think, all right, Rockwood or Cully or, name the community where there's all these really relief type services being offered.
Yeah.
And this isn't a moral judgment. We need, if a kid needs a backpack to go to school. He
Yep.
needs a backpack to go to school.
Yep.
But we've got a lot of that. And I did a study of the Rockwood community and realized I found about 80 different organizations that were doing work. This was 11 years ago. And I promise you, it did not add up to the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
It was just a bunch of stuff that was happening.
Yeah.
And so if you define that as work that's done, relief, they were basically doing relief for the community.
Okay.
And in contrast, we thought if we can do development work with our community, then we could really add value to the community.
That is so good. I've seen that before in different circles I've run. Moving. So how do we move from for to with?
Yeah. To be real, it's easier just to start from scratch
Yeah.
than to move your organization.
Yep. I mean, we say that sometimes, like it's easier to plant a church than to renew a church or turn a church around.
That has to be true, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that's going on with churches, I'll just kind of shoehorn it in now, because I'm not sure if we're going to get to it, is many of the churches here, just right here in Rockwood, have taken the step to form an independent 501c3.
Yeah, that's so cool. I want to hear more about that because there was a meeting that happened that I couldn't make. And
yeah, it's really working. And I'll get to the part about how it helps you do development with. It is a new entity, so you don't have a brand name that you're trying to drag around, or not that you're hiding from who you are or you're calling in Christ or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just a new thing, and if you create it as a collaborative environment from the get-go, as the folks at As Is Church have, and let everybody in the community know that it's an open, porous leadership structure. You really need them, whether you go to church or not.
Yeah.
People respond to that. And that's what's happening over at As Is. They're probably the best example.
Yeah, it seems incredible, like what's going on there.
They're like every low income, poor church with bivocational pastors. Like we had 13 people last Sunday. How long can we keep doing this? The answer is not very long, right? Got to do something. And they took their pastor's passion was CrossFit. And they said, maybe we could open a CrossFit gym. They did that. Very zero budget CrossFit gym. And the city of Gresham folks had some grant money that they had gotten that they needed to spend on youth violence prevention. So they were like, here. And now, and they did it into As Is sister organization.
Yeah, because you couldn't give that to a church.
Right. Now, as what's ended up happening is that it's now a viable business.
Yeah.
As well as receiving funding from lots of different sources, and the pastoral staff, because they actually spend a fair amount of their time on the CrossFit thing, like they draw their salaries from that. Now the budget for the church is really, really light. So the facility is covered, the lights, the heat, most of the staff. What's left? Not much.
Yeah. And I don't see Scott Bradley or Josh Alger like not praying with a kid or not being anything but bold about Christ and who he is.
And guess what's happening on Sunday morning? All these families that they've impacted are starting to come to church, and now their attendance is, it's way up.
Yeah.
So it's a great example. There are other ones, Freedom Foursquare, right down the street. The folks at Wood Village Baptist, they have a whole thing exactly like we just described.
Nice.
And then Gresham United Methodist, downtown Gresham, they have the Rockwood UMC Church that they've turned now into a community center.
The Rockwood Center.
Center, and it's paying the bills. And it's offsetting costs that they're incurring otherwise.
Nice.
Yeah.
So maybe give the folks watching, like, what's one first step they could take if they're interested in that as like a way to renew their church, as a way to kind of, be a sustainable faith community in a struggling neighborhood.
There are a few resources that are out there. I really can't just spit them out, but just go Google it.
Yep.
Like we're doing a conference here in May. I want to make sure I mention it before we're done.
Yep.
during that, we have one breakout session called Your Church is a CBO, a community-based organization.
Cool.
And but don't wait for that. There's stuff. It's nothing that's hard. I think it's more attitudinal. I think there's a fear there that you'll somehow lose your mission as a body of Christ if you're just a social service agency. That's real. I think an elder body, or however you make decisions, I think you should struggle with that. But there's a there. You can get through that.
Yeah. Lots of possibilities. Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. This has been really fun. We're so much to talk about. We got like 10, 12 minutes left. So we got to keep, I know we really are. We're going to have to do part 2 in a couple of weeks, but can you share some stories with us that give you hope for distressed places like Rockwood?
That's a great question. I mean, real talk, there are days after all these years and all this budget and all this success that we're like,
yeah.
What have we accomplished that's really going to take root? And outlast us. There's other days where we're like, dang, we're killing it.
Yeah, this is amazing. Yeah.
And I don't know that will ever stop, because a community like Rockwood has a lot of churn. There, people come and go constantly. You kind of start to build on an asset, and then that asset disappears. But in general, I think we're probably 3 steps forward for every 2 steps back. Not 3 steps back for every 2 steps forward.
That's what you want to avoid.
You try to avoid that. I over the years, we've trained ourselves to not look for, like I'm an MBA guy, so I was kind of trained. You look for what's efficient and effective. Like, I want an efficient program. I want an effective program. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that, except that our definitions of efficiency and effectiveness are driven by our whiteness and our upper middle class educated selves.
Yeah.
Our neighbors have a different definition of what they're even trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Or even the concept of what it means to be efficient or effective in their neighborhood.
And we have so much to learn from them.
I have so much baggage. I am still unloading. I thought the trailer was empty. There's one more bag. What we look for now is we look for life. What's giving life? What's taking off? What wants to be born? What wants to be nourished and grow?
Yeah.
Unexpected places, usually unexpected leaders.
Yeah.
It's not efficient. It's not effective, but it's giving life. And I think, when I think about, like, what's an example? It does come down to people. Now, we have like 29 programs now. We're almost a $10 million budget with 50 employees, if you can believe that.
My goodness.
It's when we had like...
That freak you out? I mean, it's exciting, but it's like, this is what God's given me to steward. And,
I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, it's like 3 of us.
I remember. I was around.
You were around?
Yeah.
But today,
and we could talk about 2020 and how that, was a pivot for so many of us, but
today,
amazing.
With all of these programs going on, we keep focused on the individual. And one individual I'm really excited about right now is, there was a young African-American guy, I talk about him in the book, named Vince. And Vince was raised in North Portland, kind of a well-educated guy, middle-class sort of family. And his brother got involved in drugs.
Yeah.
They didn't even know that. And he got murdered in Rockwood. I actually was working at one of our early offices. It was a spring day. The door was open. I heard the gunshot.
Wow.
But we would hear gunshots, so I didn't think anything of it. Vince came to Rockwood to, be there with his, as they were getting ready, preparing his brother's body to be hauled away.
Yeah.
And it was his first experience of, what is this place? What's going on here? Very similar, tragic circumstances, but similar to me, just 3 or 4 years before, going, what is this place? And it was just 1 block away from there. So Vince came to one of our lunch and learns, which is a free 1 hour, once a month, just come and learn about the community, so that he could get a handle on, what is this place that his brother lost his life to?
Yeah.
and learned for the first time some of the principles that you and I have been talking about today. And it really grabbed him. He began a process of wanting to be involved with us. He volunteered. He has amazing public speaking skills and presence. So we put him, we kind of gave him the mic and kind of, really encouraged him to take a lead. He ended up moving to Gresham, and he ran for city council and won.
Wow.
So today, Councilor Vince Jones-Dixon has had a real impact in Gresham. But Vince is only, I think he's like 34. He's just getting started. He really loves, he has a calling for public service. And he just announced a couple weeks ago his candidacy for Multnomah County Commissioner.
Wow.
So Lori Stegman will be terming out, is the phrase, and there will be a special election here in May. So if he gets 51% of the vote, he will be our next commissioner. There's no other serious candidates now. So Vince is going to be our next commissioner. Your next commissioner. District 4 for the county. And I'm sure onward and upward for him. He's a good man and a bridge builder, a guy who loves to seek consensus and bring parties together. If we did nothing over 11 years but help a guy like Vince and there are others launch, that's long-term giving life. It may not be efficient and effective, but there's going to be a lot of life that comes out of that. That shoot that kind of came from the ground.
And that he has a heart for Rockwood. He has a story that's there that's meaningful to him. And that he knows the opportunities that are there.
And the realities too. It's not easy, but it's giving life.
That's cool. And what you're describing is, I'm always going to think it through in a pastoral lens, maybe but it sounds a lot more like the wild goose chase of the Holy Spirit. And, just like, what is God doing in this community, and what, we talk about, lives and communities transformed, and it's connected.
I will say that my definition of the wild goose has changed. I will say that my understanding of the stream of God's mercy has broadened considerably. It's much more wide and vast than I ever imagined.
Well, my spiritual director says we swim in an ocean of grace. So there you go. It's a stream. It's an ocean. It's and living that out with people is such an honor, Okay, let's maybe close with a couple of quick speed round questions.
All right.
Is that okay?
It's the hot take time?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. So of the types of outreach that you guys have done, what is one that, what's one that is great for you, and why do you love it?
That's a great question. I knew you were going to ask that. So lately I've been really excited about health fairs. All it is you use your parking lot in the case of Freedom 4, or in a case like yours, you've got a huge, beautiful auditorium and public and community room. You invite all the different social service agencies, the other churches, the people who want to just do tutoring, whoever, everybody, and do a little bit of footwork to get out in the neighborhood, make sure folks know. When we do one of those, if it's low attendance, it's 500. If it's high attendance, it's 1,200.
Amazing.
Maybe 1,500 is probably our peak ever. And good things always come out of health fairs. And if you want to present Christ, or you want to have a booth where people can get prayed for, you do. And the right people will find it.
Amazing. That's so cool. So what do you think? What do you say to churches? You've done a lot about this. You talk about it in the book, but churches outside of Rockwood that want to serve Rockwood.
Wow, that's a tough one.
And that's a tough speed round question too, because there can be a lot of for instead of with.
It's almost always for. We have had every major church in Portland at one point or another sit in our offices talking about what could they do. And the answer is they can't. They can have a huge impact. But it's not the kind of impact churches want to naturally
we're going to got John Perkins on you. You're going to move here. And,
All right, step one, die into this community. But But some of us are dying into and have died into the community. We don't all need to die into the community. You can support the people who are.
Yeah.
I think churches are great with the big motion, like we raised an offering, here's $15,000, and that's fantastic. But better is low and slow.
Yeah.
Just low and slow. Don't expect results the first year. Don't measure with the traditional efficiency and effectiveness indicators.
Yeah.
It just invest in the relationship with the leaders and some people, and just gear down to go at the speed of the community. All we can do is move at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
And especially trust across multicultural barriers. That's a slow speed.
Yeah.
But once it's established, once you've broken that barrier, once you've crossed bridging capital into bonded communities, miraculous things can happen.
Yeah.
But the churches usually have kind of found another bright, shiny object by then.
Yeah. Sadly. We did a podcast about literacy. And, we had someone share, a Christian leader about tutoring, a kid that didn't look like him in his neighborhood for years. And what a huge difference that makes as far as
both parties.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it's beautiful, beautiful vision and long-term. Yeah. So maybe one more question. What's next for you and Lynn and the organization that you'd like to share with us?
We invite all the listeners and viewers to the Flourishing Oregon Conference.
Yes.
It's May 28th and 29th in the Hyatt Regency, downtown Portland. The tagline of the conference is "Community Leaders at the Root of Change." And every one of your listeners and viewers is a community leader at the root of change, for sure.
Yep.
Go to flourishingoregon.org and you can register there. We're just now announcing our speaker lineup. There will be 28 different breakout sessions. And what you'll walk away from after 2 days is a pretty broad view of all the things that a community leader can do to affect their community.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, we look forward to that. Thank you so much, Brad, for being on the Jesus in the Upper Left podcast. It's been wonderful, just free-flowing conversation. And may the Lord bless you in your work.
Well, thank you, Pastor Pete.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.